Please try to forgive me. Stay here.
Swadika, good afternoon, good evening, and good morning to all those in Europe. Right. So today I'm Rose Chitanuwat. You may see me already for few of session on the webinar under the Poultry Week by Informa Markets. We have some of you already joined us in this morning on the lighting program. We stay focused on how to help improving the poultry production, whether broiler or layer. So today, one of the aspects to drive the genetic potential is about nutrition in feed. So we have our guest speaker from USA. I think this is quite late for him, but he stay away to share the session with us. The topic today is managing feed nutrition to optimize poultry genetics. Before we are going to listen to Dr. Dina Joarder, who is the speaker from North Carolina University, we would like to again inform you that the YouTube link will be provided to you. If you want to rerun the session, you can visit our Facebook VIETSTOCK, Livestock Philippines, or Livestock Malaysia. And one of the things that I would like to inform after you have seen our promotion before I am appearing here, we will have the first ever online exhibition for livestock sector, which the visitors focus around Asia and especially for the Philippines to cater the livestock Philippines market. So the first ever online exhibition for livestock sector will be happen in this end of the month, 28 to 30 July. The platform will start from 9 o'clock to 6 p.m. You don't have to pay anything, just move the venue of the show to be in your online platform. If you want to join with us to see the suppliers who supply the product that with social distancing, travel restriction, business continuity is our focus to keep all livestock sector connected to each other. So now time for our session today. May I welcome Dr. Dina Joarder. He is the poultry nutritionist from Cargill ANH in North America to start his session for next 40 minutes on managing feed nutrition to optimize poultry genetics. Please, doctor.
Okay, is my video on? Can
Yes.
everybody hear me?
Yes. Go ahead.
Okay, so shall I start sharing my screen?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so is the screen visible to everybody? Hello?
You can go to the share screen and then we will see your presentation.
Yeah, I did. Is the slides moving?
No slide.
And is the video on? Sorry about this.
So ladies and gentlemen, apology for the technical issue. So we are fixing at the back end.
Oh God. Okay.
So ladies and gentlemen, while we are waiting for Dr. Dina to send over the file to us, I would like to promote a bit on the tomorrow program. So the tomorrow program will be on the global update by Mr. Gordon Butland on the ASF, how it affects to the poultry and swine demand and supply in the market. And also with the two other speaker will be, he is the expert from Thailand, will share on the nutrition in one topic by Dr. Thirorit Kampai, and the hot topic now after the COVID, it is like the COVID push every farm to do the biosecurity issue, biosecurity system in their farm. So lesson learned from what we have during the COVID in Thailand will be shared as well to the audience. All right, I think he has the presentation on hand now. For those who has question on the feed nutrition, you may give me the question in Q&A box. If we run out of time due to this delay, we will send the question to Dr. Dina to answer to you directly. All right, so I think, Dina, are you ready? Okay, that's it. So apology for all delay, and now enjoy your expert sharing from Dr. Dina. Okay, the sound is coming, the sound is coming.
Okay. 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 Can everybody see the screen? Sorry about that. Sorry about this hiccup. All right. So thank you everybody on the online viewing, and thanks to the Informa Markets team for inviting me for this presentation, which is managing feed nutrition to optimize poultry genetics. So my name is Dina Joarder, and I'm coming from Raleigh, North Carolina, from the east coast of the US. And I work as a poultry nutritionist for Cargill. So the outline for today's talk, I'm so sorry. So the outline for today's talk will be impact of genetic selection on modern broilers. So mainly the genetic selection has improved energy efficiency and dietary protein utilization. And we'll also talk about importance of nutrition in starter phase. And sustainability is becoming important every day. So as nutritionists, how we can have strategies to improve sustainability. And one of the key strategies is to reduce dietary crude protein. So we'll talk something on those points as well. So if we look at the broiler performance and try to map as what would the different factors that impact broiler performance. So number one comes genetics, which is about 70% of that comes from genetics. Nutrition is about 10%. However, the cost of nutrition could be as high as 70%. And the broiler depends 100% on the nutrition for daily requirements for growth and performance. Next comes the health. So if we are talking about health could be a cost, and as well as it could be conserving energy for the birds. So if you're talking about antibiotic free broiler production or never antibiotics ever, as in the case of US, so this is gonna slow down the growth and will of course impact the broiler performance as well. Environment and management plays a big role, and it could impact as much as 15%. And then there is cost of emission, as nitrogen and phosphorus are excreted. So these are also going to uh, impact the broiler performance. So if we look at the broiler feed cost, we all know that top one is energy, then protein amino acids, followed by phosphorus. These are the top three costs. And we will focus mainly on interaction between energy and protein on growth today. So rest like anticoccidials, antibiotic growth promoters, vitamin trace mineral premix, and enzymes and other feed additives that are used can add to this cost. But energy, protein, and phosphorus are the three primary drivers of the broiler feed cost today. So there has been tremendous genetic potential over the years. And because of this energy efficiency increase, the broilers have improve their FCRs multifold. So what are the changes that has taken place over the years? So there has been physical changes in the digestive system, basically. So absorption has probably increased, but the digestion efficiency has almost remained constant or the same. The energy for growth has increased. However, the energy has reduced for overall metabolic processes. But still the metabolic heat has increased in these broilers by quite a fold. And this is kind of an area that's an important area to conserve energy for the broiler production. So if we look at genetics and interaction with the environment, and this could have a tremendous effect on the energy efficiency of the birds. So if the environment interacts positively or negatively because of temperature or ventilation rates to remove metabolic heat, the potential here is as much as 700 kilocalories that could be either saved or could be lost through this interaction between genetics and environment. So when genetics is the number one contributor, if the environment interacts negatively, it takes a back seat, and therefore it's not able to, to express its full potential. And here the energy cost could be as high as from 400 to 1400 kilocalories per kg. And coupled with management and ventilation factors, this could become an impact, and we could see the growth sometimes slowing down and the bird not picking up. So this is one of the major factors that could impact this energy efficiency of the broilers. So moving on to energy utilization, and remember this, that this is a thermodynamic, this goes by the law of thermodynamics, wherein the feed intake or feed energy is consumed, which is transformed into chemical energy and then partitioned for different metabolic activities for the broilers. So if we look at gross energy and how that is being partitioned to be able for the bird to be utilized for its metabolic activity. So gross energy, if we start with 100%, for example, if you have 4,400 or 4,500 kilocalories that you start with a gross energy, the urine and the fecal loss is pretty substantial, which is about 30% more or less. So you lose about 1,200 kilocalories from that gross energy. Next is metabolizable energy, and you could lose about from that 30%. So you come here as a metabolizable energy which is available for the bird to utilize. So that's about now 70% from what we started as a 100% unit. Next is this big factor again, which I discussed earlier, is the metabolic heat increment or the thermic effect, which is about 26%. So from 70%, you lose this 26%. And if you couple disease, stress, and cost of immunity, you ultimately land up with a net energy of 36%, what you started as a 100% unit. So this is the energy that is basically available for the bird to use for all its activities. So what is the opportunity here? So how can we use this energy partitioning for our nutrition purposes or for our applied nutrition purposes? So to do that, genetically it's driven that from gross energy to our AME or metabolizable energy, it's a fixed. We're gonna lose about 30% anyway. And the next one, from AME to our net energy that's available for the birds, we have an opportunity of 26% as a genetic potential. And we need to keep this as constant. So this heat increment, if we keep this within the genetic limits, probably we're going to conserve more energy. And as per the law of thermodynamics, since energy cannot be transformed, cannot be created or destroyed, it can only be transformed or change its forms. So we can take help of that kind of concept here. So the biggest factors that kind of impacts us and will be able to put us in a negative zone for energy is housing condition. That could have an effect of about 8 to 10%. Lighting program could either help you or conserve you energy again, and pellet quality will be helping you to conserve that energy. About it could go as high as about 200 kilocalorie if you have very good pellet quality with good particle size and proper moisture in the diet. And immunity and managing the diseases. So put together, these factors could save us almost about 12 to 1400 kilocalories. If we are able to not keep these factors, then we will be going into the negative zone. And remember, energy drives both growth and uniformity of your flocks. And most of the losses that we see in our normal broiler production happens because of these environmental factors if they are negatively interacting with the genetics. So what has been done in terms of genetic progress? So energy efficiency for fat and protein has been improving. So if we, so basically the energy efficiency is the energy taken in and the energy that is lost, and minus that. So whatever energy is retained, it's called as retention of energy. So if we look at the retention of protein and retention of fat, which is REP and REF here, in terms of energy retention efficiency, for protein, it's about 55%, and for fat, it's about 44%. So the genetics are focused on improving this protein deposition efficiency, and they want to decrease further the fat. So in a broiler carcass, typically it's about 8% fat and about 20% body protein. So the geneticists are focused on reducing the fat pad, which is still about 2%. So they want to reduce this fat pad and transfer all that back to protein deposition. So that's where the genetic selection direction is currently on the broilers. So moving on to energy digestion in the early period. So you can see here in this graph, so from 0 to about 15 days age, we are still evolving, and the bird is under a suboptimal condition of energy digestion. So in the grower period, so as a nutritionist, what should be our focus, keeping in mind that the energy digestion is still evolving and it's still not at its fullest. So the opportunity here we can take is that in the starter phase, the opportunity is actually amino acids. So if we have a lower feed intake, this is gonna be negatively impacting our growth again. So in terms of amino acid, there is a linear response in terms of lean mass growth. So the deposition of protein is about, the potential is about 30% during this starter period. So it's accumulating a lot of muscle growth on its body. So we could take that opportunity even if energy is not very efficiently kind of used at this stage. So adjusting dietary amino acids, so knowing what's going on and what's the feed intake. So we could adjust dietary amino acid. For example, we could increase lysine, and all the other amino acid ratio to lysine could be increased to take advantage in this period to achieve this lean growth. So which kind of sets the foundation for the birds to accumulate more growth and efficiency in the latter stages. So what's the influence of energy on growth in the later stages? So what happens at the finisher stage, kind of after 25, say 28 days, during that finisher phase, the lean growth kind of plateaus here, and then the fat deposition starts to increase. So this plateau is probably our optimal energy level of a diet, and it's all about question of economics after that. So it's very important for us as nutritionists to recognize what that plateau is, so that we can kind of start not to put too much energy in the diet, but start rebalancing depending on the feed intake. So this plateau is a pretty important point or a signal for a nutritionist to kind of rebalance their diets depending on how the flock is coming from the growth curve, from the previous growth curve. So if we look at the caloric cost, for example, and I have sorry, I have taken a US example here. So this follows law of diminishing return. So for example, between 22 to 35 day, if you look at our cost here in the US, so we are probably about 7.72 dollar cents for 10 kilocalories of energy. So if we want to increase AME at this stage from 3050 to 3175, which is about 125 kilocalories, the cost of 1 point FCR improvement for us will be about 1.5 dollar per 1 point for 1 point FCR improvement. However, if you try to push this energy from 31, so for example, if you want to keep that energy at 3175 to 3300 between 22 and 35 days, there is a law of diminishing return that kicks in. Our cost of FCR for 1 point increases from $1.5 to about $4.5. So recognizing this plateau, as I said earlier, is the key factor, and this follows the law of diminishing returns from there on. So recognizing this can help us to, excuse me, help us to reduce our caloric cost and achieve efficiency. So these are some of the pointers we nutritionists should be taking into account when you are trying to rebalance or design our energies and amino acids for our birds. So in the finisher phase, the physical capacity of feed intake is kind of becomes a limit. and then dietary energy and protein deposition also are kind of becoming a limiting factor there. So increasing dietary energy intake in late finishing stages will increase only lipid deposition, and it won't increase our protein deposition, which is the PD max here. So it's already reached its PD max. So any energy you put more than that is gonna be converted to the lipids or to the fat. And then environmental stresses like density, disease, heat stress can significantly limit expression of this genetic potential of this PD max. So as I said earlier, if the environment is negatively interacting with genetics, so we will not achieve all these genetic potentials that has been set inside the bird, whether it is protein deposition or energy efficiency for putting on that muscle mass. Oops. Sorry. So some of the formulation strategies that we can think of during this period to take advantage of the genetic potential or to conserve our energy? So me myself as a nutritionist here, I spend a lot of time looking at my QC and confirming or reconfirming the estimation of the metabolizable energy or prediction or estimation of that either from my corn or my fat sources. So whatever predominant energy sources that you are using as a nutritionist, we need to spend a lot of time perfecting our QC. So this is almost a science and as well as an art. So especially right now, if you have new crop corn coming in, so bulk density becomes very important. It could dramatically change the metabolizable energy or your prediction or estimation, especially in the growing birds or in the starter phase. So that's a key area to kind of looked into. We need to have a proper estimation of nitrogen free extract, the total digestible carbohydrates, starch and sugars, and if the sugars are not converted into starch, they won't be utilized by the birds as well. So probably sample 100 kernels of your corn, weigh them from several times, and try to see and compare that how much bulk density that you're achieving compared to your old corn or some other source of corn. So as a nutritionist, this is the key thing that we do in an estimation of our of or prediction of our metabolizable energy from our energy sources, either it's fats or it's corn or some other ingredient that you are using. So we need to adapt this QC/QA system, and we need to have this stringent system, whether you use a wet chemistry or an NIR system or something else. So whatever you are using, either your own system or a third party system, this needs to be very, very robust so that we predict our energies pretty correctly, as I said. So if you have access to modeling softwares, so you can always validate based upon your growth curves that you are achieving with the model that has its own standard curves. So that it kind of helps you to validate that whatever nutrition you are putting, and if season changes, your ingredient changes, you are still staying on track and not deviating too much far away from the standard growth curves, because that's all once again goes back to energy inefficiency or loss of energy, and thus we are not able to achieve the maximum broiler potential. So using modeling softwares is a good idea. And as far as guideline goes, you can use any broiler management guide or whatever breed that you are using, and you can use those guides as guidelines. And depending on your feed cost, you can either relax it by 10% up or down. You can take that swing easily. And different breeds, I would say, respond a little differently. So some breeds, they respond to amino acid very, they are sensitive to amino acid density and they respond to that. Some breeds, normally the breeds today, they don't respond to energy too much, the broilers. Okay. So while formulating diets, so relax your constraints and look at the whole parameter on your shadow cost, and from your unit cost of energy, try to see where what's that range that you're having and try to use that range. So that kinds of helps you to kind of even develop your own model or own growth curves as well. So this is pretty powerful, and any feed formulation software that you are using will have these capabilities. And of course, we at Cargill have all these digital tools, and if you guys wanna wanna help with these or wanna play with these, so please get in touch with our colleagues over there so they can help you out with that. So moving on, energy relationship with particle size. So ingredient particle size influences grinding cost, pellet quality, mixer uniformity, growth performance. So everything is tied back to this particle size and pellet quality. And the opportunity could be as big as about 187 to 200 kilocalories. So particle size analysis should be performed at least weekly basis. And if you're doing any maintenance with your feed mill equipment, whenever your corn characteristics changes, so corn has got the big for us corn has got the biggest influence on particle size. So whenever a corn source change or characteristic change, we need to analyze our particle size. And if there is a new corn crop, new crop corn comes up, so the moisture is going to change again. So that's going to influence your particle size too. So here is a data, an actual field data, which kind of just I'm showing example here. So probably they were a little off on the 500 micron or zero point 0.5 millimeter grind size, and they had more of 1.5 grind size here, the corn and as well as the starter grower finisher diet. So when we kind of advise them to move it back or bring this percentage down from 1500 micron or 1.5 millimeter back to the 500 micron range, so their performance drastically improved. So these are some of the indicators that you also can use in your day-to-day nutrition QC and help with your production system. So this is some of my own data from my graduate work here at NC State. So I analyzed, or I kind of studied the effect of fine and coarse limestone particle size in one of my experiments. So I was using 200 micron. So typically the industry uses here about 150 to 200 micron or zero point 0.2 millimeter limestone particles, and I was testing the 900 micron or mean particle size of 900 micron or zero point 0.9 millimeter limestone particle. So what I saw was that we had an improvement. So the digestibility, or sorry, the solubility of calcium was, sorry about this. So the solubility of calcium was lower in the gizzard in vivo with coarse limestone particle compared to fine limestone. So that actually kind of helped to drive calcium and phosphorus digestibility. So as the solubility was getting lower, the digestibility of calcium and phosphorus was increasing. So any improvement we bring about in digestibility is going to automatically conserve our our energy and put it back to where it's required for efficiency and growth. So similarly, I looked at the effect of coarse limestone particle size on apparent ileal amino acid digestibility of the broilers, and I found that all 17 amino acids that I analyzed, except for methionine, all the amino acids were significantly having a significantly higher digestibility or greater digestibility than the fine limestone particle size. So just to reiterate here again, particle size is a big factor. So look at it and follow your particle sizes very carefully, especially when the moisture is going to change in your corn. So switching gears here and moving on to dietary proteins. So what's going on in terms of genetics? So protein deposition. So utilization of protein of dietary protein is still it still remains low. So 45% of whatever protein that nitrogen we are the birds is ingesting, 45% of that is kind of excreted out. So rate of protein deposition is the main determining factor in So the rate of protein deposition is main determining factor in amino acid requirements, and with tissue turnover rates relative to the protein deposition changes, it's increasing with the age. So as the age will increase, the relative tissue turnover rates relative to protein deposition will also increase. So which means that we need to look at our amino acid balance here. So for example, the total sulfur amino acids and threonine may increase relative to lysine, but something like tryptophan may still remain similar. Also, there are some drawbacks that availability of all amino acids from all ingredients are not fully known. So we don't know the exact digestibility of these. Cysteine in protein still remains a poorly digested source, and that's mainly because of its disulfide bonds that it carries. On branch chain amino acids for isoleucine, leucine, and valine, they bypass the liver, and they are all mostly metabolized in the muscle. So they escape this first pass metabolism from intestine and the liver. So as the bird grows, this branch chain amino acid becomes more and more important. So I'll talk about it a little later. So the energy cost of deposition of protein has been estimated, way back in 1976 as zero point 0.7 kilocalorie per gram of protein. So zero point 0.7 kilocalories is required for deposition of per gram of protein. So you could take this kind of numbers and also see or look at the amino acid ratios and see how much is going to cost you in terms of energy if you try to increase it. Similar with our AME data, so the lysine digestion or amino acid digestions are fairly suboptimal till about 10 days of age. For energy, it was about 15 days. For about lysine, it's about 10 days of age. So what about kinetics of protein digestion? So there is an interaction between pH, digestive enzymes, and proteins. And the research has shown that varying ingredients or using different sources of proteins other than soy meal can induce lack of some digestive enzymes. And also the trypsin inhibitors like the lectins, the cunids, or the Bowman-Burke units could increase when we use protein sources other than soybean. So there's a very nice paper that came out in 2019 where they compared soybean meal, rapeseed meal, and corn DDGs and peas, and they looked at the expression of the proteins, and they found that with the change of protein source, really the way the enzymes are secreted also change. And there is also something called as intestinal homeostatic factors. So those 3 or 4 factors also changes. So it's a pretty interesting paper that came out on this protein digestion. And also once the proteins are solubilized and whatever remains insoluble, this insoluble fraction of proteins remains similar throughout the digestive tract. There is very little that's digested in the post jejunum in the ileum. Probably some of that may get fermented in the ceca. So buffering capacity of diet is a key one in the starter phase, again to attain lower pH and in the proventriculus and gizzard. And this kind of drives all our trypsin, chymotrypsin, trypsin, and rest cascade of enzymatic process that happens. So for example, pea protein has got 121 for our buffering capacity versus soy meal, which is 276. So probably it may be a good idea to combine pea protein and soybean protein in the starter diet to achieve a lower buffering capacity to enhance kind of have a lower pH in the proventriculus and subsequent helping in the enzymatic digestion process. So pH is the very key in the starter stage, and you can see here. So and this kind of changes as the diet moves, as the feed or the ingesta moves through different parts of the intestine. And this pH is really critical because it kicks in or it's associated with all the digestion and assimilation process. Otherwise, the energy cost is going to be higher to digest your feed. So what about efficiency of utilization of amino acids? So at about 8 days, 99% of lysine that is consumed over maintenance can go to the protein deposition. And for at 14 days, probably total sulfur amino acids, 71% over maintenance can easily go to our protein deposition. So probably in our starter phase, lysine and our total sulfur amino acids are still the key. And the bird is also going feather at that point. So the deposition efficiency in feather for these amino acids and for muscle protein accretion is kind of different efficiencies, and they keep changing as well. So we could take advantage of something like this when we are formulating our diets or discussing our nutrition. So if growth is stalling and once amino acid requirement is met, and why this growth is stalling, if the amino acid requirements are met, the extra crude protein will be need to be catabolized and excreted. And this is a very expensive process energetically. And this also leads to enhanced or increased metabolic heat, and this metabolic heat increment requires more oxygen supply. So you will be driving away your oxidative capacity to oxidize your feed towards mitigating this metabolic heat. And this is one of the primary reasons why you see that we have reduced feed intake and subsequent growth is reduced. So for amino acid density, always, higher is not better. So if you are a little bit marginal, it's always good. As soon as you go over the limit, all these imbalances starts, and then the amino acids are bound to catabolize because they got nowhere to store. They'll have to chop off the carbon chain to use the carbon and then excrete all the nitrogen out. And that's the primary factor we see in hot weathers why our growth stalls or we see reduced feed intake. So situations like this, we need to focus at our lysine level and rebalance our amino acid ratio to lysine. Look at them very critically. So in your diet, in our diet formulation, amino acids are always ratio to lysine, and probably it's better to use a max constraint on CP for formulating, not the minimum constraint. So give it a little bit of range so that it can balance and it's not walking on that tight rope or on that margin. So whenever you are looking, doing your feed formulation, look at those constraints very critically. So normally we will just have a constraint of an energy, a crude protein level maybe, and just on lysine. So rest all are ratioed to lysine. And always formulate diets based on amino acid ratio to lysine, not on individual amino acid levels. And you can pick up these amino acid ratios from any breed that you're handling or any genetics that you're growing. You could follow their guidelines, and as I said, start off with either 10% higher or lower. Probably 10% lower is better because they are always overestimating in those genetics guidelines. So coming on to a practical feed formulation guideline focused on the starter diet to improve feed intake. So phase feeding, as we all know, is the key with rebalancing of amino acid density. So for example, in a pre-starter diet, if you have a ME of 2900 and a CP of 22% and a digestible lysine of 1.35%, your methionine ratio to 41%, M plus C about 78. So typical ratios that these are not too far off from the breeding company's guide, I guess. So you could use one of any of those, and then you can move on to a starter phase. So if you're only doing a 35 or 40 days broiler or 42 days broiler, it's always good to have a pre-starter diet that sets up, and then you can move on to a starter diet, or you could call it as a second starter too. So if you have about 3000 kilocalories, 21% protein, ratios are always the same. Once you decide your ratios, lock it in. You don't tinker with the ratios. Otherwise, you will not know what's gone wrong if something goes wrong. So as the bird is approaching the protein deposition max, the branch chain amino acids become very, very critical. So we, at that moment, we need to look at our lysine, our isoleucine to lysine ratio and valine to lysine ratio as well. It's a very critical factor. So probably you could instead of having 0.75%, or if you're using 0.72% to lysine, valine to lysine, you could increase it by zero point zero 0.03 points, maybe move it up to 0.78 ratio to lysine. Now, isoleucine is very expensive because it all comes from the soybean meal. If you try to increase your isoleucine, you might, so that's going to drive your feed cost quite high. So probably it's better to play with valine, and synthetic valine is kind of, I think, available around the corner. So it's always good to use synthetic valine. Arginine is already available, and the ratios are, used are as high as, up to 120's ratio to lysine, arginine to lysine. So look at your branch chain amino acid as you are moving from your pre-starter to starter, and as the bird gets into like a 21-day, post 21-day phase, the threonine requirement becomes a little higher to meet the gut mucin output, because you have that second cycle of coxy that happens during that stage. So look at your critically look at your threonine to lysine ratio during that phase. And I think proteases is a pretty good idea to be at least having in this pre-starter or starter diet, where the bird still has a lower amino acid digestibility, and also the suboptimal digestion of of energy as well. So proteases is probably a pretty good idea at this stage. So moving on to reduction of crude protein, and this kind of helps us in managing our environment as well. So, however, the problem with reduction of crude protein is that the data that's available in the literature or in the scientific world is kind of very scant. So we need data in each phase if we want to reduce crude protein step by step. And often what we have seen here in our experience in North America, if we try to do that, often we lose carcass yield and performance. We may not see it sometimes, but we definitely see it in the carcass yields. But but there could be a reduction in performance as well. But this is something that we need to kind of pay very close attention, and all of us as nutritionists should try to attain this reduction of crude protein. So I thought, based upon this limits data, which was published in 2019, where he had 4 phases and he kind of step by reduced crude protein, pretty good data set. So I think in Asian context, probably we need 4 phase feeding if you wanna reduce crude protein in the diets. So starter could be up to 10 days, and grower, or otherwise we could combine starter, grower, and reduce that day from day 16 to probably 1 to 14 days, and then a grower 17 to 30, and finish at about 31 to 42 days. So what are the risk of kind of crude protein reduction in our formulation exercise? So in our least cost formulation, if we lower crude protein and try to fortify them with our amino acids or synthetic amino acid or feed grade amino acid, the amino acid is gonna be replaced with this lower energy soya meal. So your soya meal is gonna go out, synthetic amino acid is gonna be pulled in, and then the corn is gonna replace that to balance it. So the problem with that is what we have seen here is that as soon as the the soybean meal reduces, it kind of starts impacting your protein deposition, and you start to lose carcass yield. So that's kind of one drawback with crude protein reduction that I have observed. But I think we are working and going into doing some trials on this area. So literature says that if we have, so we need 22 amino acids, right, for for to be complete in our requirement for the amino acids. So if we are optimally balancing all our essential amino acids and also taking care of the non-essential amino acids, probably we can reduce this crude protein I think up to 19%, we can go up to 19% of crude protein reduction. But key thing here, we should have this optimal balance of essential amino acids and both non-essential amino acids as well. So when we are reducing crude protein, density also becomes important, and but it helps us to reduce nitrogen emissions, good for the environment. We could achieve performance with reducing nitrogen and having that through our synthetic amino acids. And as I said, up to 19% crude protein reduction could be done. And this has got a major impact on reduction of foot pad dermatitis as well, which is kind of pretty important for all of us here in the US and as well as in Asia. So it improves litter quality, it deposits less water in the litter, and thus you have this improvement in the foot pad quality. So coming on to my nutrition philosophy, so for me, starter feed is always a key, and it's not a cost for me, but the biological importance is greater than cost of a starter feed for me. And if I could do a pre-starter, I'll always do a pre-starter. And we should always look at our like 7 days growth should be minimum 4 to 5 times of the original body weight that we had. Otherwise, will have to stimulate the feed intake. So when we move to grower feed, this is a big transition from crumble to pellet. Hence, we need to manage the nutrient density. And majority of the problems in our broilers happens during this transition phase. So I would probably say keep it simple approach, not necessary to achieve proper moisture levels, which can ensure proper cooking of the batch. By all means, we should avoid either overfeeding or underfeeding, too much underfeeding of amino acid. So avoid any amino acid imbalance. Always formulate diets based on amino acids ratioed to lysine. So this probably is my last couple slides. So moving forward, so as we are looking into new alternative protein sources like seaweeds, insect meal, so newer nutrition strategies are coming up. And at the same time, to benchmark them against soy meal, we need help of proteomics and biochemical techniques that will help us to observe or to have an idea on these proteolytic enzymes at the physiological pHs. So the challenge is going to come as we use more and more alternative ingredients. And then the question is, how do we still either improve digestive efficiency or keep or maintain our digestive efficiency? So I think the science is moving pretty well towards proteomics, and that's going to be a great tool for us in coming future for either our traditional ingredients that we use or whatever new ingredients like algae meal or seaweed or insect meal that we want to try and use in our incorporate in our diets. So this is Sakamura's lab's data, and she kind of interestingly looked at protein or amino acid efficiency and deposition on feathers and feather-free bodies. So she then combined both that data, and this all this work was done on cob, and from 1 to 7 days, 8 to 21, and 22 to 35 days. And this is a pretty nice paper, and she kind of compared multiple regression, multivariate regression, simple factorial design, and then compared that with Brazilian tables, Rostanios, and the guidelines. So kind of a nice paper to look at, and that gives us some kind of idea on total sulfur amino acid to lysine ratios, 3 into lysine ratios, and also valine to lysine ratios. So some of these guidelines that you can probably think of using as a guide here. So with that, I will end my presentation. Thank you so much for your attention, and I really apologize for messing up in the beginning. And I kind of lost my track in the beginning just because I was not set up pretty right, and I might have lost some information as well. But my apologies. I was not prepared very well. So I'll be happy to take any questions from here. Thank you.
So Thank you very much, Dr. Dina. No need to apologize, probably because it's too early for you, 3 a.m. there. So it's possible to getting something lost. So there are a lot of questions on the chat now. And we actually run out of the time already, but we can have few of questions that to ask you. So the first question would be, what do you think about the nutrient digestible protein versus crude protein?
Good question. Very smart question. Yeah, we think about that all the time. So let me scroll back to my. See, I still have these challenges. Okay. So I think it's a good concept, but the utility of digestible. I mean, the swine guys are already using it, right? For us, the challenge is we don't have digestible protein values kind of figured out for all the ingredients, so that becomes a challenge. So what I was trying to show you is my slide on the partition of energy here. So if you look at this one, so something similar could be done with protein to come with from crude protein to come to a digestible protein, and you could do that in your system, and by all means. But still, the critical thing that is driving your growth and performance or FCR will be your amino acid balance. So I would say comparing between a digestible protein, probably pretty good idea in the starter phase for sure, and versus amino acid balance. I think amino acid balance or ratio to lysine or that density kind of will take precedence for my side. But that's a good concept. We should keep working on that definitely.
All right. The next question is, what is your opinion? I think the audience, most of them asking your opinion
Uh-huh.
about the use of protease in complete feed based on corn and soybean meal.
Okay, so based on my experience, and I have, probably most of you know that I have worked for DSM and done a lot of studies with protease. We don't use much in the US here, but I think in the starter diet there is a definite value for using a protease. And why I'm saying this, so even if you are just using soya protein, so the major component or anti-nutrition factor of soybean is what? One is trypsin inhibitor. No matter what you do, you're not going to diminish the trypsin inhibitor totally. It's not going to be becoming zero. And then the globulin proteins of soybean, the glycinin and the corn glycinin, are not 100% digestible at all. So they are in that cage effect. So I think using exogenous protease, especially as I showed you this slide of mine where lysine or your digestibility of amino acids is low, so definitely a great strategy in a starter phase, I would say.
Okay. So next question, also from your opinion, uh, what do you think the how should I put it? What do you think about the interest to use whole grains in the complete feed of broilers? Is it common practice in EU with wheat? But do you have some experience with corn?
So with the wheat, and I have worked in UK sometime, and you could do that with wheat, no problem. They do that there, and you could do that. But with corn, the challenge is if you try to do that, you will lose FCR. So we have tried that in my graduate program here. We have run a lot of particle size studies, and we have looked at cracked corn, whole corn. We have looked at several of them, And one of my seniors, Dr. Wilmer Pacheco, he's now a professor at Auburn University. He's doing a lot of particle size work. And I was talking to Wilmer about a week back on this. So I think not a great idea, and that's the reason I showed you this particle size slide here. So any deviation you go from this, as soon as you start inching towards 1500 micron size, like here, you're gonna lose performance in FCR. And what's the reason? The reason is this happens. Your gizzard becomes, I mean, we all say that we should have a very, muscular gizzard. It's actually not true. So what we found out in our research here, if these gizzards become too muscular, it's going to consume energy. So you are again losing energy, what we are trying to conserve for the function of this gizzard, and you will lose FCR. So my opinion, not a good idea using too big particle size of the corn. You may have little bit, but no, not with corn.
All right, so I think there are more than 10 questions on my hand. What I will do is to send to Dr. Dina, and he can answer directly to the audience or even through us and inform you. Come to the last question, Dina. It's like, what is your opinion about the interest of using emulsifier in high energy level feed?
I think the trial data shows that there is benefit. Clearly, there is benefit in the starter diet. So if you use emulsifiers, because the bile secretion, and again, I'm going back to the proteomics paper, the bile secretion, it's not up to the optimum. So I would say if you can afford it, if you can pay for it, by all means, you can use emulsifiers, and I think you can see benefit probably in the performance. You would pick up the benefit in the
All
performance.
right. So, ladies and gentlemen, it's time finished for our session today. So I would like to thank you, Dr. Dina, for joining with us today, and apologize for all the technical issues. And I would like to say thank you to our audience that stay with us today for the Poultry Week webinar. For tomorrow, we will have the session on ASF and COVID-19, update on effects to Southeast Asia Poultry and Pork Industry by Gordon Butland. And we have the evaluation of intestinal health in broilers. And the last one on layer production improvement by using nutrition by expert from Thailand. So on behalf of Informa Markets, I would like to thank you for staying tuned with us the whole 2 days. And I also would like to encourage you to join us on the online exhibition on 28 to 30 July. Thank you very much. สวัสดีค่ะ